This podcast episode is with a woman who does not want to be identified for reasons of safety, and she writes under the pen name Drew Augustine. So in this video, there is no picture of Drew, just of me, to keep her privacy and to enable her to stay anonymous.
I'm Drew Augustine, and I'm the author of The 20 Murders, which I believe is the first overtly gender-critical piece of commercial fiction out there on the market. There have been lots of other GC books, if you like, mainly fairly factual ones or fiction that kind of hints at it, but no, this one is full on.
It sounds really interesting. I'd like to hear a bit more if you want to tell us a little bit more about it.
Certainly. So I've been a writer of commercial fiction for quite a few years. I write in different genres under different pen names. So a few years ago, I guess that's when you would say that I peaked. I became aware of a lot of the abuse and vitriol that was being directed at J.K. Rowling. And I went on to her website and I read her blog, which had caused all this stooshy, if you like. And, what she had written, it appeared perfectly sensible to me. She is a victim of violence from men, and she is very much a proponent of, defending women's spaces and protecting their sex-based rights. And nothing that she had written offended me in any way. And I thought, well, what's going on here? So I obviously was concerned about that. Now, around about the same time, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm Scottish, and the Scottish Parliament enacted what was called the GRR, which is the Gender Recognition Reform. Now, this piece of legislation would have given any male over the age of 16 the right to self-identify as female and access female-only spaces. You're probably aware there's a court case. It's the Scottish Government have gone to the Supreme Court to argue the case that men can be women and made a right fool of themselves in the process. So so we had the GRR in Scotland, and I think the most shocking thing about that was not just that the Scottish Parliament voted this thing through, and there was a real push to get it through. I think it was before Christmas. So not only did they force it through, but they did not allow any safeguards to protect women to be added to this. So it meant that convicted rapists or, domestic abusers or whatever would have been able to self-identify as women. So no protections for women. So the Scottish Government, this is the SNP and Green coalition at the time, have just shown an absolute callous disregard for the rights of women. No care whatsoever to their safety, their privacy, their dignity. All that seemed to matter was the feelings of these trans-identified males. So, yes, that's, I guess, what you would say, what piqued me. And I thought, well, I was supposed to be writing a third book in a series that I've been doing, and I could not concentrate on it. I was so angry about this. I thought, my activism, if you like, is writing. I was going to turn my pen to this. And so down the rabbit hole I went, and I just did a lot of research. I started to read lots of books on the subject. I read Helen Joyce's Trans, Time to Think, Material Girls, Tough Crowds. I listened to lots of podcasts whenever I was cooking, ironing, anything like that. Listen to podcasts. I'll listen to Let Women Speak and Turf Talk Tuesday. I've actually spoken to Kelly J.
Yeah.
I went to the Edinburgh protest, spoke to her then.
I was there as well.
Were you? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing the other person that I came across in this is Barry Wall. His pseudonym is the EDI Jester. And I actually signed up to his Warrior Teacher programme, which is fantastic. I've learned so much. Deep down into this rabbit hole I went. And it was really, I would say it was when I read Hannah Barnes' book, Time to Think. Now, this charts what happened at the Tavistock Gender Clinic in London. And she details the thousands of children, some in the books, I believe, was as young as 3 years old. And it was the so-called treatment, and I use that in quotes, that these children were offered by this clinic. And this was effectively a one-way ticket to drugs and surgery. And these are As we know, they're experimental drugs. This has got nothing to do with pausing puberty. These drugs, as we know, cause real damage to children. We're talking about, risks of their fertility, as well as some serious medical conditions as well. And then quite often this would, lead on to surgeries as well, mutilating surgeries. So, I was so angry at this. But really when I read that book that I realised that I wanted to write it from very much the point of view of the people, and particularly the children affected by this ideology. And that's where the idea came from. And the other, I suppose, quite commercial decision was I wanted to write in a genre which would have very broad appeal. So I wasn't going to write it as a romance. It certainly wasn't the subject matter for a romance. So I thought crime fiction, gritty crime fiction lends itself really well to this, and it should appeal to men and women as well. And so that was quite I suppose, a commercial decision. And that's why I settled on that and the story. So it's very much a police procedural. My main character, Morven, she's a seasoned police officer. She's been working in the force for a long time, and she finds herself smack bang in the middle of a police investigation into a series of murders. And she soon realises, I don't want to give any spoilers away here, but she soon realises that what connects the different victims, because it's not obvious what's connecting them, is a very politically sensitive topic. And it's the same topic that affects another character who happens to be an academic at the local university. And she comes up against the same issue. And basically her story is very much influenced by what happened to Joe Phoenix and Kathleen Stott, so both professors, and they were hounded out of their university positions for holding perfectly reasonable beliefs. So that's where that came from.
Really interesting. I want to read it now.
Excellent.
And hopefully all the viewers will want to read it as well. I think they will. So so you wrote the book because you sort of found out about what was happening to women, and you're involved in loads of different areas of activism as well, aren't you?
Well, when I went down this rabbit hole, I listened to TERF Talk Tuesday, and I joined Let Women Speak, and then it was the Women's Rights Network and Barry's Warrior Teacher Programme. And the other thing about this kind of writing, I don't know whether your listeners are aware, is publishing itself is very, very captured. Now, I knew right away that this book would have to be published independently. I'm an indie author for many reasons. There was no way that I was going to get this past a literary agent, which is the usual route, and then the literary agents approach the publishers. Can you imagine a book like that ever getting past the Wokarate gatekeepers? Not a chance.
No. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, And massive challenge then.
Very, very challenging. So when I started to look at some agents' websites, I thought, there must be some TERFy ones out there. Come on, there must be some sane and reasonable people that see this for what it is.
But would they tell anyone?
This is
the issue, isn't it? It's not just that. I bet there's loads of them out there, but they're undercover because they can't speak out.
You're 100% right. And that was the reason I joined. There's a group has formed called Scene in Publishing. So it's one of these, it stands for something like Sex Equality Network or whatever in publishing. And it's full of authors and people involved in the publishing industry from right across the world. They have a website, and they're on Twitter as well. And it's just astonishing about the fact how much it's effectively censorship, because there's the publishing industry, in acting in the way it is making sure that this alternative point of view, which I would say is probably held by the vast majority, the silent majority of the population, at least 80%, I would say probably more, never makes it onto the market. Now, the publishing industry have the whole market tied up, so when you're walking around the supermarket and, there's books on the shelf, you're never going to see independent voices there. They pay a lot of money for these supermarket shelf spaces. Right. So only certain types of authors of the approved narrative ever make it onto there. So yes, I thought, all right, I'm going to publish this on Amazon. And it was funny, talking about when I first started to look just to see if there was any sort of sane and reasonable agents and publishers out there. And the stuff that's on some of the websites and bios is hilarious. People saying, oh, we're only interested in queer stars of the future, and we're only interested in hearing from you if you're LGBTQ plus alphabet soup people, or this whole list of oppressed and marginalised groups. But the best one was, I was told that they would definitely be interested in hearing from me if I was being rehabilitated from having committed a crime. So I wrote quite a witty little piece for the Scene and Publishing Network about how I considered murdering a literary agent just to see whether it would help me get published. I'm joking, of course. But
of course. You can't say that in jest, though, can you?
I know, waiting on the knock on the door. I've joined the Free Speech Union. I would recommend everybody in this fight does it.
Yes, I'm a member as
They've
well.
They've got your back. Yeah.
I joined before I went to Edinburgh because of the hate speech law that was coming in.
Exactly the same.
Yeah. I don't think we needed it in the end because we just ridiculed it, didn't we?
Oh, I mean, the hate speech law is an absolutely shocking piece of legislation.
Yeah.
And this was enacted by the Scottish Government. And basically, it stops anybody from saying anything against the proved narrative. Technically, if I turned around and said a trans woman is a male, I could have been done for hate speech.
Well, that was the whole event, though. That's what we were talking about.
Exactly. And the other thing was they removed what's called in Scotland the dwelling defence. So if I expressed that opinion in the privacy of my own home, that would be no defence. So that's policing speech.
It was horrific, wasn't it? Yeah.
But
I mean, is anybody being punished under that legislation, though, given what happened when they released it? Is it being used?
I'm not aware of it, but the problem is that, people who don't have a major public profile, would you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
If they're not a member of this network, would you know? I mean, obviously, if J.K. Rowling, she was absolutely amazing. I mean, the tweet that she put out on the day, 1st of April, I mean, the irony.
It was brilliant, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, she basically was saying, come on, come ahead. And she would accompany any woman to the police station, repeat back the words. Yeah. I'm not aware of it, but in theory, it could happen. And the problem is that we have now got a very authoritarian government under Keir Starmer and his lackeys, who seem to be very willing to push through more hate crime legislation. We've had the Stushy recently about Alison Pearson, who's the Telegraph journalist, who's arrested for a year-old tweet that she made.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it's horrifying. I'm really concerned about this government and free speech and democracy and all the other things that they're pushing through, like this. I don't know what the official term is, but basically helping people to end their own lives.
The assisted dying, yes.
Yes, it's sinister.
Yeah, for me, I suppose, I mean, the whole thing is just awful, but whether it's trans rights or whatever, but it's the threat to free speech because, love him or loathe him, Elon Musk, he summed it up. It's the bedrock of our democracy. And if that goes, it all goes. And that's why in America they've got the First Amendment. We don't have that here.
We don't.
So far we've had the backing of the courts, but for how long? Keir Starmer is a prosecutor at heart, and he has shown that he would have us all in jail for wrongthink. I mean, during the riots, there was I believe she was a wife and mother, and she got a longer sentence. She got something like 3 years and 3 months for a social media post, which was more than the man that had punched a police officer in the face. So I was listening to...
it's rapists and murderers. Why is it I'm not sure if it's murderers, but rapists and child sexual predators are being let free as well. So
and domestic abusers. I saw a petition the other day, saying please stop letting the domestic abusers out. So there's stuff in the prisons full of people who don't agree with the government. I was listening to, I think it was Constantine Christian, who does the Trigonometry podcast, and he was saying that 400 people in Russia were arrested for social media posts last year. And he said, do you know how many in the UK in the same period? It was 3,300. And I think that's a truly shocking figure.
Yeah, it is, because we think of Russia as a bad place where
a totalitarian state.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're always talking about Putin being evil and all the rest of it, but
yeah. So we need to have a close look at what's going on, not just in the UK, but across Western nations.
Definitely.
There is a move to curb people's speech, and they are roping in the large tech companies. I'm not allowed to advertise as Drew Augustine on Facebook. I've fallen foul of them. And
really?
Oh yeah, no turfy stuff is allowed. There are other platforms as well. So love them or loathe them. I am so grateful to Elon Musk for giving us a free speech platform.
I think Twitter's amazing now. It's much better.
Well, the nut jobs are going over to Blue Sky, so that's fine. Yeah, they can have their echo chamber.
And I tend not to get targeted on there now, like I used to before he took over. But now I don't even get any pushback.
I know it's just astonishing what's happened to women who speak up and say perfectly reasonable things.
Definitely.
I've just read Jenny Lindsay's book, Hounded. So Jenny Lindsay's a poet and a writer, and she documents. I think she calls it the anatomy of a hounding, and it's very much about shutting down, silencing women, make sure these voices can't be heard, which actually segues very nicely into what happened to me at university as well. So a few years ago, I thought, if I'm going to do this creative writing malarkey properly, I'm going to do a course. So I went off and I did a master's in creative writing, and I really enjoyed the course. And I wasn't really sort of aware or peaked at this point, but we had a lecturer who was a full-on trans rights activist and social justice warrior. And she used some of her lectures as an opportunity to preach about J.K. Rowling being a terror. She was asking, now this is a bunch of creative writers, right? She was asking us to read texts like Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Now this is where all this stuff comes from. This is a hard left Marxist piece of writing. It's very much about how education should be about indoctrinating children and producing activists, not teaching children, certainly not teaching children to think for themselves. And I thought, oh my goodness, and that also concerned me. Anyway, she left and off she went. And I thought, I enjoyed my time so much at this university that I was going to do like a part-time PhD in creative writing, and I had an idea, and it wasn't a terrific idea, but some of my thesis would have touched upon a gender-critical area, and it was to do with how they teach sex education in schools. So I was invited for interview. Oh goodness, it was a Zoom interview, and my tutor was there, who's lovely. It was the head of the postdoctoral sort of side, and there was also a rainbow lanyard wearing woman. Basically, let's just say it was accepted, but I was told, I got an email to basically say that the supervisory team would only take an inclusive pro-trans approach. So they were already telling me what my thesis would have had to say in order to get through. And I just knew that the viva at the end of this, if I'd done this, it would have taken me about 5 or 6 years, and I would have had to pay for it myself. The viva would have been like a struggle session. Can you imagine? It would have been absolutely, I can't imagine what it would have been like.
The thing is, though, that ideology does not make sense to me. So when I try and explain it to someone else, I can't, because it's not logical. So I'll try and put their point across, and then I get mixed up because it's not logical. Do you know what I mean? So
I 100% agree. It cannot survive.
How can you write such a big piece of work in that vein when it doesn't make sense to you?
You're 100% right. It cannot survive the sunlight.
Exactly.
That's why we have this no debate, because they know as soon as you have a debate, and we saw it now in the Supreme Court. I've still to listen to the whole thing, but I listened to
I
for
need to
Women's
catch up as
Scotland
well.
advocate.
Yeah.
He was brilliant, and it is worth listening to. You'll get it on YouTube.
Yeah, I've had one of the women summarised what's happened. So, yeah, I really want to watch the videos.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's my weekend watching when I'm cooking or ironing or doing all the domestic stuff as usual. So the thing that really concerned me there was not just are the universities completely captured, and it means that the students going through that system will never hear that alternative point of view, but they're also stopping that body of work, these ideas ever getting into that body of work. So that thesis will never see the light of day, sorry. I withdrew my application, no surprise there. I am still thinking about whether I should bother my backside going through all that, or maybe I'll just turn my pen to it. Maybe there'll be another.
There must be a way of doing it. If you want to do it, there must be somewhere you can do it.
Yeah, maybe I'll approach Joe Phoenix.
There's a gap in the market.
I think so. So, I mean, yeah. The other thing that I turn my attention to, well, I think satire is a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I love satire.
And it's no accident that Barry Wall adopts this persona as the EDI jester. He's very funny. He's worth watching. You'll find him on YouTube or Substack.
Yeah.
And he just rips the mick out this whole thing, and quite rightly too. So I had this idea that I wanted to do something satirical. So I wrote a murder mystery dinner party game. It's on my website, and it's called Murder at Laughingstock Clinic. And so you can play 10 players. You invite your mates round. The only thing I'd say is be very careful who you play with. As in all things in life, but it's a whodunit, and it is a bit of a hoot. And Barry actually is the voice of my Inspector Clueless. So I'd like to offer your listeners a half-price discount on it. It's on the website, and if they use the code TERF5, that's TERF5, if you do add to cart, you'll see a facility in order to put in a discount voucher. So it's available half price.
Yeah, I shall put those in the notes, that information in the notes, so that that's there.
Fantastic. Yeah. Actually, I got the family and everybody I thought, again, you've got to be careful who you play with. We all tested it out during the summer, and it was hilarious, actually. I had a really good night. And the other thing that I must tell you about, I don't know when this podcast will go out, but during December, I'm doing and it's free to access from the website, an advent calendar of flash fiction. And invited lots of people who are all involved in this fight. So you've got Let Women Speak, WRN, PIT, now that stands for Parents with Inconvenient Truth about Trans. So these people very much, the families affected by this ideology, and Barry's Warrior Teacher Programme. And we've all contributed short bits of fiction and poems. We've got Maggie Smith and various other authors and whatever who've contributed, and I've actually been given a song lyrics and the woman singing it from the Pit Network, which made me cry when I listened to it. I'm not a crier, so it's just amazing. So go on to there, and as I say, I can't guarantee it'll be as good as your chocolate and your advent calendar, but it'll certainly last longer.
Yeah, it sounds really good. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And was there any other things that you wanted to talk about? You came with a list, didn't you?
I do have a list. Yeah, I mean, I suppose, we're very much focused on gender ideology and trans rights and how this is so harmful, not just to women and children, gay people as well, but it's particularly how it affects children and their families. But this is part of a much bigger thing, and it comes from the same poisonous root, if you like. It started out in academia, really, and it's everything from critical race theory, extreme climate activism as well. And when you start to look at these things, they very much have adopted the tactics of the cult, debate, cancellation, delegitimise anybody who spouts that, the non-approved narrative. And this is what people. I did a social science degree when I was just a youngster, and I know what Marxism is, and this is cultural Marxism.
Yeah.
So I know I sound like a tin foil hat wearing conspiracy theorist.
I wear mine with pride.
But yes, this is cultural Marxism in any guise. And do you know, actually, I read first of all, I came across a podcast. This was Megan Murphy was talking to a lady. Her name is She Van Fleet, and she's written a fascinating book. It's called Mouse America, A Survivor's Warning. Now, she grew up, she would be about 6 years old. She was in kindergarten when the whole Cultural Revolution in China kicked off. And she's written an account of this. She's now in America and she's speaking out. And she's very much drawn parallels between what's been happening in the West. And she talks a lot about the trans rights movement as well and what happened in China. And this is very much about using identity politics to divide people and set one lot against the other. And I think trans rights activism is very much like that. It's very, very divisive. And she wrote the book as a warning to say, wake up, people. This could happen again. These people, they're after their communist utopia. Yeah. It's so dangerous. More people have died, in pursuit of utopia than I think have been killed by mosquitoes. It's killed hundreds of thousands of people.
No, it's really worrying when you see what's going on in the world, especially in the West.
Yes. And, these people, they'll try to destroy our cultural heritage, same as they did in China, actually. And we've seen it with the Black Lives Matter protests, with statues coming down and, getting people to reject their colonial past. And I'm not saying that there are not things that need to be explained in a historical context, but it's very much about rewriting the history. It's about the people being denounced, the cancel culture. But most worrying of all of this is the attack on free speech, because, as I say, if that goes, then we really are in trouble.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's really worrying.
Yeah, so anyway, if you're interested in reading The 20 Murders, you'll find it on Amazon. It's available in paperback and ebook. And if you're on Kindle Unlimited, it's free, actually. And I've done quite a few blogs, actually. They're on the website under Drew's News, and you'll find out, if you want more about me and my reasons for doing it. I actually took, I guess, a fairly unusual step for an author of fiction to publish my bibliography, which details some of the research. It's not exhaustive, but a lot of this stuff was what I read and what I tried to dramatise in the book. I suppose one thing I would say is, the murders are fiction, and so are the people and the place. I called it Strathmurray. I don't believe there's such a place exists. But the most shocking thing about the book is the backdrop is very much real. So, and I think that's been quite a shock to a lot of people.
So you published your bibliography, which isn't usual when you're writing a fiction book. So can you tell us a bit more about why you did that?
Well, I knew that, or I suspected there would be a lot of pushback from the other side, and I would be questioned about, why I had written about certain things. And I basically say, well, look in the bibliography and you can see that this actually has happened.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad, but I've actually lost a few friends through this who have, become aware of my beliefs in this, or who have read the book and have been really quite shocked.
I mean, we call them beliefs, but they're not really beliefs,
no, it's fact.
It's fact. Mm-hmm.
Trans rights, gender ideology is the belief.
Yeah, as soon as you come out, basically the first time I came out publicly was during the election campaign, and straight away I had, I think, 4 women who have trans children who blocked me straight away. Yeah.
That's very sad.
And I wouldn't treat them any differently because they're people. Do you know what I mean?
I came
and I'm
across
quite happy to interact with them.
Helen Joyce's, she did a podcast, an interview, and she was talking about the parents of trans children and just how resistant they are, because if they were to admit to themselves, they cannot admit to themselves the harm they've done their own children.
Yeah. The thing is, these children are actually adults, so that they're like the offspring rather than children. So, but even so, they're still, I think it's really difficult for them to see any other point of view.
I think so, because I think the introspection that they would have to do would just be too difficult, too painful, too impossible for, as a parent to admit that you'd actually actively done your child harm. And I'm afraid, by transing a child, you are doing them harm.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel nothing but sympathy for the young people caught up in this social contagion and the families that are affected by it.
And it's really difficult, especially when, and you hear the circumstances when that's happening. For example, when they're being told about their child will end their own lives. And we know by looking at the evidence that that's probably not true. But if you're in that and facing that, I can't imagine how difficult that is.
And it's a horrible tactic that they've used, and they've said it to parents in front of children. Would you rather have, an alive trans child or a dead child? And that emotional blackmail. And the reason I believe they do it is there's only, you could only justify sterilising a child in order to save their life. So they have to pitch it in that way. You've got to do this or your child will die, because no parent would ever agree to, giving your child drugs that would sterilise, that would affect their sexual function and render them sterile.
They don't believe that that's what the harms are either. They don't.
No, they dismiss it.
They often don't understand what the drugs are going to do.
And that's why the Cash report has just been so important.
Definitely.
Yeah. And also on that point, from the research, it would seem that these children are very likely to, or far more likely to commit suicide, but it's after they have transitioned. And it's within about 7 years, I think, is the period when they wake up and they realise what they have done and the consequences of it. And they're actually starting to suffer the effects that the drugs and the surgeries have had on their body. And what child, what young person can possibly really imagine what losing your fertility is at that age? You don't. It's something that you don't become aware of until you're older. It's
really heartbreaking.
It is very heartbreaking. In fact, I've been following the parents with Inconvenient Truth About Trans at Pitlot for a while. They have a Substack, and the stories on there written from the parents' point of view and the family's point of view who've lost people to this, lost their children. It's absolutely heartbreaking. So, yes.
I'm not sure I could read that.
Yeah.
It just does sound really grueling.
Yeah, it is. It's a tough read.
Yeah.
Anyway, it spawned some beautiful poetry and songs and stories as well.
That is one of the great things that's come out of the movement, isn't it? Like the poetry and the songs and the friendships, and there's a lot of arguing as well, but there's a lot of strong friendships coming out of it.
Do you know, the arguing is a good thing. So the other side is very much no debate. You will not discuss this because they know that it can't survive the sunlight. We're women, we're all from very different backgrounds and we've all come together, and it's a healthy collaboration, and we will not always agree, but we will speak about it, and that is consensus, and that's collaboration, that's healthy, and that's good. So it doesn't matter what group that you've gravitated to.
Yeah, it can sometimes be very uncomfortable. I don't like conflict, although I'm getting better at dealing with it, but yeah, it is sometimes very uncomfortable, but I can see from that point of view, it is healthy, and you can sort of think about things in different ways by listening to each other.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And like you, I don't like confrontation either, which is why I, use my pen and hide behind pen names. So.
But yeah, it's really good that you've written this book and you've got other books as well.
I do. I write under different pen names and different genres. Through Augustine, I might write another one. I have an idea actually, so I don't think we've seen the last of my characters. And I very much wrote it because I wanted people to become aware of the issues, and maybe these are people who they don't want to have to read factual books. I mean, I devoured them. I loved, read Helen Joyce's Trans and Kathleen Stock's Material Girls, but not everybody enjoys that. And some of the books are quite a hard read as well.
Yeah.
And I thought, what better than, you get your beach read out and you've got time and holiday and you read not just a very compelling and engaging story, but you happen to kind of maybe learn some stuff. And
those are the best stories, aren't they?
I've had quite a few people saying, oh, you've really opened my eyes to stuff that I was oblivious about. And I think that's part of the problem is people, they're kind of aware of some stories in the press. And I think sport has been amazing at bringing this to the fore. So, I mean, we saw the malarkey with it in the Olympics and the boxers and whatever. And we've seen the Leah Thomas, this huge 6'4" swimmer next to Riley Gaines, bless her. So sport's been great, but I don't think people are maybe aware of the other issues and how it affects this ideology and what these people are trying to do. It affects everything. It affects women's spaces, whether it's in hospitals. I mean, up here, we've had the Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre was run by a trans-identified male who was telling women who questioned this that they were bigots and transphobes if they didn't want therapy delivered by, another female. That person is a psychopath.
Yes.
I've probably done for hate speech for that, but hey-ho.
He is there's just a special place in hell for someone who does that.
Absolutely. And actually, I hope that there's a special place in hell for the women who are the trans maids and all this. Yeah, they need to wake up and see what's been done to their own sex class. And Nicola Sturgeon, I hope there's a special place for her. Yeah,
well, given all the pushback that she got, but she just didn't change her mind, did she?
No, she was hell-bent on showing her progressive virtue signalling colours. That's all she cared about.
Even though she couldn't answer the questions, though, could she?
No. And then we had that, shortly after this, we had Adam Graham, who...
Yes, Isla Bryson.
Exactly, Isla Bryson.
Well, that was at the same time, wasn't it? That was when Edinburgh was happening.
Shortly after. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was shortly after Nicola getting her... GRR through, I think, and then we have the lovely Isla Bryson with his wig and his
lunchbox. That's a very old-fashioned way of talking about that, isn't it? That's very from the 90s.
Yeah. Well, that was so wonderful because it piqued so many people, and the Scottish people are like, "What? How can you have that in a women's prison? You're basically just given the keys to the hen house to the fox." That was absolutely appalling. And what's been happening in America as well as the other person I follow in this who's been wonderful is Graham Linehan. He does a Glenor update, and the number of violent rapists and murderers in female prisons because they say, I have the inner feeling of being a woman.
I mean, what does that even mean?
Yeah. Exactly. And if you're not a woman, how do you know what the inner feeling of being a woman is?
No.
It's bonkers, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's catsuit crazy.
Well, I am a woman and I still don't know what they mean. I don't understand what they mean. What is it?
I know, and I was a bit of a tomboy, brothers, and I was a bit of a tomboy, and I do fear that had I been growing up now, I might have been sucked into this somehow and been convinced, that I was not a real woman, and I wasn't a real female because I like to go out and skateboards and climb trees with my brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do worry.
It's really worrying, isn't it? and it's particularly affecting autistic children and children who would grow up to be either gay or lesbian. So it's really concerning for those children in that demographic, because they are targeting them and grooming them, aren't they?
They are, and it's good that the gay community are starting to wake up to the homophobia that's rampant from the TQ lot.
Definitely.
GB Alliance have been amazing.
There's some amazing organisations have sprung up because of this.
Yes.
To fight
We
it.
need to see the back of some other ones. So we've got a really insidious bunch, a charity called LGBT Youth Scotland up here, and our ex-CEO was running the biggest paedophile ring in the country. He's now doing time. And they've had other people contributing to the literature who've been sent to prison for paedophilia. The Scottish Government have given this bunch about $2.5 million.
It's shocking. It's taxpayers' money.
It's not only that, they've been overreaching their remit. They're supposed to just go into secondary schools and talk about the whole LGBTQ stuff. But no, they're targeting children in primary school as well. So that is the worst of it. And children in need, they were given this charity money. And I see their CEO's recently resigned as well.
Yeah.
Malcolm Richard Clark's just done an amazing sort of expose of it. He's written a couple of things recently, and he's wonderful as well. He actually, his posts make me laugh out loud. He's so funny. So another Substack that's worth signing up to.
Yeah, I'm part of a small group of women who are looking to start some sort of activism with parents. So we're collecting these books which are aimed at primary school children, and they're horrifying. So we've got Autistically Queer, and we've got Grandpa's Pride, and there's loads of other ones that are just...
They're shocking. I actually did an action for the Women's Rights Network. If you go onto their website, they have documented a lot of these books that are showing up in libraries and schools, and they are not age appropriate.
No, they're being given free to schools.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think if parents were aware of the content of some of these books, they would be absolutely horrified.
Definitely. That's what we're aiming to do, to show them.
Have a look at the WRN website for that.
Yeah.
And do share your research. I know we're in different groups, but we're a healthy collaboration.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And we're all in the fight together.
We want to work together.
Absolutely.
Because we don't want to reinvent the wheel if someone has already done the research and
have a look at that. But if you can add
worked.
to it and let us know, and we will also publish it as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, Drew, was there any other subjects that you had on your list?
No, I'm sure you're fed up listening to me by now, but it's been absolutely wonderful to
thank you for coming on. It's been fascinating, and it's really interesting to find out what's going on in the world of publishing, because I don't think I've heard much about that, although I did interview Lissa Morgan, who stood for the Party of Women. She's wrote a book and she's self-published, and that is about her activism, and it's about her hypnotism and stuff like that as well. So that's a good book. But there's not a lot of information out there that I've come across about the publishing world, but I've heard about other areas that's really captured. So
yes, I'm afraid this is the long march through the institutions of the cultural Marxists. I know I'd sound like a complete nutter saying that, but it is true. So many of our institutions are completely captured. We've seen it, the criminal justice system, the police, civil service. It's depressing to think about it, but we'll see it going. We will see it going. We're not going to go away.
No.
We'll continue this fight.
It's too harmful, isn't it?
It is. But out of all of this, we must defend free speech, because we'll not be able to talk about any of it if that goes. And I would think very carefully about who you're voting for. You might have to hold your nose, but think very carefully and know what your candidate stands for.
I was very lucky in the election because I voted for myself.
Good for you. Very well done.
It felt very, very bizarre.
Very well done.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway,
I take my hat off to everybody who stood.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on my podcast. And
thank you so much for having me.
No problem.